Welcome, everybody, to another rendition of The Lone Wolf Show. I'm The Lone Wolf, and you are watching www.witchcrafttv.online. And this is the special series of the WitchCon presenters, a conglomeracy of the largest online, meeting of witches in the world. And we have a special guest backstage all the way across from the pond from America. Because why? Well, witches, we're worldwide. And we love you, and we'll have our guest right here on the station right after this intro. Emma Kathryn, heard a big rumor that you're going to be on WitchCon this year, 2026. Is that true?
Indeed, it is. And I can't wait. I always find they're such like good events, they're well run. There's so many great talks, like it's amazing. I love being a part of it.
So how'd you hear about WitchCon?
This will not be my first time. I have presented I think twice before. Definitely once. I was on last year. I think it's twice. Like the years just merge into each other, don't they? And so yeah, I've done talks with them before, so yeah. And I think anything in the witchcraft world, I always think no matter how long you've been doing this stuff, it's always good to kind of, you know, get different perspectives and listen to different voices. And this is a great opportunity to do that.
So this is your second year or third year with WitchCon?
Yeah, I want to say it's my third. I was there last year, and I think I was there the year before. Um, so yes, this will be my third time. Um, so it feels a bit like coming home a little bit.
What was your presentation the first and second year?
I bang on a lot about all kinds of stuff. So I think the first year I did like magical herbs and plants. Last year I talked about obeah and voodoo. And this year I'm talking about spirit work in magical practice.
So tell me about Obeah. What is Obeah exactly? What is that?
So if I'm being lazy, because sometimes I am, if I'm being lazy, I'll often describe it as Jamaican witchcraft. So my father was born in Jamaica and he came over to the UK during the Windrush era. Um, so if I'm a bit like I say, if I'm being lazy, I call it Jamaican witchcraft. But the truth is, it's practiced throughout the Caribbean, and it's a magical and spiritual practice. There's lots of similarities with witchcraft. Some people might not like me calling it witchcraft, but ultimately, it's unavoidable that there's that link between the two practices. So
So does Obeah, is that like a, a name for, because there's many different labels. Everybody wears different hats, you know.
hmm
Um, is Obeah kind of, is it familiar to what Marie Laveau in New Orleans, kind of her personality, that type of tradition? Is it like voodoo?
so it's not voodoo. There is a misconception that it is, and I think sometimes those misconceptions come down to people maybe not really understanding, and on the surface there might be similarities. You know, I often describe voodoo and Obeah as being magical cousins in that they have that shared root in West Africa, but there's lots of differences between the two. So within Vodou, for example, you've got the lower who are the intermediaries between humanity and the supreme creator being, and you petition them for lots of different things. And I think the biggest difference with Obeah and Obeah is that one is a structured religion and spiritual and magical practice, whereas within Obeah, there isn't really a structure. You're taught by somebody, and what you learn will be governed by what that individual has learned. There's no rules, so to speak, so it's governed by the person's moral compass. There's no kind of morality behind it. It's up to the person. Everything is doable, let's say, within Obeah. And of course, I often find that ethics and all of that kind of stuff can shift between, what's happened and what's been going on. And on the surface, something that might look kind of sinister or bad or negative often isn't. A lot of the time, it's protective. But I think the biggest difference for me is that Vodou is a community. So it'll be, in the temple, you'll have the Haungan or the Maman who kind of direct the ritual and kind of guide the believers. Whereas in Obeah, it's the Obeah practitioner, and sometimes they'll work for the community, but oftentimes it's directed by their own will, so to speak. And I think it's easy to understand it if you think about, say, Wicca, for example, versus witchcraft. You know, there's a lot of crossover, but ultimately they're quite different paths, aren't they? So that's kind of a good analogy, I think.
Does Obeah have like a particular pantheon of gods and goddesses? Or is it one central goddess or god? Can you explain that?
Yeah, so there is a belief in a supreme creator spirit, Nyam or Nyame. But and this is where it's kind of similar with voodoo, whereas they have Bondi, which is a supreme creator god, but it's almost virtually unknowable to us as mere mortals, as humans, So there's little interaction between humanity and the supreme creator god. Instead, it's a spirit work, a spirit led practice. So there are spirits that you work with within Obeah, but not so much the gods. And oftentimes they're nature spirits. So, like, you have Sasabonsan, who is the wild god of the forest. And then there's other spirits as well that you work with. And each spirit kind of governs a different area. So for instance, you have Papa Bones, who is a kind of psychopomp and is kind of the gateway into Obeah. And then there's Asase, which is the earth. And so there's different spirits and different classes of spirits that you work with for whatever result you're wanting to get, or whatever working you want to do.
Will Mother Nature ever lie to us?
That is a really good question. And I think it's quite a complicated question, because I think sometimes I don't think she lies to us as such, but sometimes it's our own understanding that is maybe out of line. Okay, so we might get some information. A lot of the time when I do tarot readings, and people will sit down at the tarot table and they'll ask a question. And I often say that when people sit down, they really know, but everything else gets in the way. And so when they get an answer they don't necessarily want, or it's not what they were looking for, then they start throwing all of the but what ifs and I can't and this, that, and the other. And I feel like it's the same with nature. So not necessarily that they lie to us, but sometimes I feel it's our own kind of egos that kind of might misinterpret or not understand the cues and the clues and the messages that are given.
So in the scope of witchcraft, or we can call it as many different names as we have different cultures across the planet, and time periods and geographical areas on the planet. As for like someone that is a wise one, do you think that there's a certain element of being a wise person of humanity that we all kind of agree upon? And do you think it's better for humanity that we, reach outside the box?
Yeah, I do. I think in our own material day-to-day lives, it's easy to get like kind of bogged down, and we want things, I think, as humans to be very neat. and tidy and fit into specific criteria. But sometimes the truth is it doesn't. If only it did, right? Things would be so much easier. So I do think that there is an element of actually, in order to be a wise one or someone who is, I always like to say, on the path of the hermit. I'm a tarot nerd, so so I always think that we have to be able to kind of look outside of the box. We have to be able to question things, um, our own motives and feelings and emotions, and those of other people's. So in my day job, I'm actually a teacher. I work with children with autism, and one of the things that I think is really important and actually has so much correlation to witchcraft and magic is that a lot of the time, a lot of the work that I do is centered around, okay, this is that person's lived reality. Those feelings are true, even though that their perception of it is true, even though the actual fact of the matter is something different. And I think in witchcraft, we have to spend a lot of that time kind of traversing that middle space between those two. What we think we know, what we feel to be true, as opposed to what is. And it's not that either of them are wrong, but sometimes they can be diametrically opposed. And the work then comes into navigating that space between the two. Does that make sense?
I mean, truth is very, very subjective. Of course, it
Yeah.
makes sense. So, you're an author of several books, Reclaiming Ourselves and Reclaiming Food, Gods and Radicals Press, Witch Life in Seasoned Songs. And it says Llewellyn, your bio. Llewellyn Worldwide Publication is one of the largest publications for the occult and witchcraft on the planet. And being from United Kingdom, or over there right now, how did you get in contact with Llewellyn Publications to be able to publish with a large publication like that?
I've been writing for a while, mostly so when I started writing, and I think one of the things that kind of anybody feels when they start anything creative that's kind of based on their own practice and their own ideas, it kind of stems from a bit of self-exploration, but also actually, I don't know, I feel like humans have this creative urge to put forth and to share, and it creates discourse with other people. So that's always kind of been, I've always liked writing and that creative aspect that comes from that. And I've been writing lots of articles for a long time for various online and in print journals and magazines and websites and that kind of stuff. And I'd written my books for Gods and Radicals, which is now Soul Books, which is quite a small independent press. And I always like writing for those because I always say, they give you a lot of editorial freedom, so that's always quite nice as a creative. And then it was during COVID, the lockdowns, that I kind of thought about Llewellyn, and I think I'd been stuck in a rut, so I was working from home. I always say to people like, and it's a bit weird to say, but I always feel like COVID was quite a not a great time for me, don't get me wrong. But it was a time where I had more time and energy to direct towards that creative endeavor. So I was working from home, the school was closed. I was doing like a few online lessons a week and planning. So I had a lot of time. And for the first part of that time, I think I got stuck in a bit of a rut, because it was the first time I'd not worked, so to speak. And for a while, it was nice just to kind of follow your own routine at home. But then actually, after a few weeks, you think, oh my God, what am I doing? And I think my witchcraft practice suffered as well, because I'm very used to being quite a busy person. So everything is almost, I have to be quite strict with my time, so everything's almost regimented. Like, this is the time I've got for this is the time I've got for that. And so I really had to look at what I was doing in my witchcraft practice and how I could kind of use that as a tool to motivation. And I always say that's where my first book for Llewellyn came from. So I needed to kind of kick myself up my bum a little bit. And then I thought, do you know what? There must be loads of people who feel the same. It was such a weird time, wasn't it? You know, and
Right.
so I had this idea for a book, and I don't know what made me submit it to Llewellyn. So Llewellyn, like you say, it is one of the largest publishers of witchcraft and esoteric material in the world. And I'd been familiar with it for a long time. I think most people who practice witchcraft are. And so, I had this idea for a book, and I just thought, what? I'd written like the first few chapters. I thought, I'm going to kind of put a proposal through to Llewellyn. And in my mind, I wasn't expecting it to get accepted. I just thought, what? I'm going to do it. And if they say no, what? Not a big deal. I'm still going to write it anyway. But they didn't. They accepted it, and it kind of went there.
So tell me about, you're a teacher, and when you teach, are you teaching younger people, older people? Is it college? Is it what kind of teaching?
So my day job as a teacher, it is in a school, so it goes from the school itself goes from early years, which is maybe nursery age, so 5 upwards, to 16. So in the UK, it's like year 11. That's the final year of schooling, and then our pupils would go on to college or whatever. So I teach the older students. So throughout my career, I've taught the whole breadth, and so like it's crazy how many there's so many correlations between teaching and witchcraft, and teaching witchcraft as well. And so I found that elements from both, so there'll be elements from my teaching profession, and that experience with other people, and having to find ways to communicate with people. They have massively helped my witchcraft practice, and vice versa. And so it's kind of seeing that exchange of energies and ideas, and how I guess we as the practitioners are center in our practices. And so it's almost like in all the spheres we step in, I always feel that witchcraft element is present most. And so it's really nice to be able to see how one informs the other and vice versa.
So when you're in, and I hope I'm saying this right, Nottinghamshire, United Kingdom.
Yeah,
and it's crazy because I was born in New Hampshire, which is probably like from Europe, like from the Shire, the type of thing.
Yeah.
But when you go to work, and you're having your school and you have your students and things, do they ever hear whispers, or is there any like a rhetoric or a commentary like, oh, do you know that she's really a witch? Does that ever happen when you're teaching?
Well, I guess I'm pretty out there anyway, so like the whole school know what I do, whether it's pupils or staff, which is kind of nice, because I think at first when you practice witchcraft, I don't know, when you practice witchcraft, at least for me, I was quite nervous as a new beginner, for quite a long time actually, to be quite so open. Part of that is because you think, oh God, I'm going to have to kind of defend it at every moment, and sometimes you just don't have the energy for that. Sometimes you can't be asked for that, and then sometimes it's just because sometimes people's opinions are like shocking, or their knowledge, or what they expect that to look like. So you think, oh my God, I don't have the energy to kind of deal with that. But actually, what's been nice is how interested people are. And a lot of the time when you explain what it is you do or what it is you believe, they go, oh yeah, that makes sense, So that's quite nice. And then I think with the pupils as well, what I think is quite nice is that actually it shows them that you can be different. You don't have to just fit inside one given box. You can let your own personality shine through a little bit. So I think it's nice to for me, it's a bit of an empowerment for my colleagues, but also for the pupils. So yeah, it's nice when they talk about it.
Very, very interesting. So is there ever points of oppression in the United Kingdom? Is everyone pretty open to it, or is there ever like any? I know in the 1970s and the 80s, particularly in America, there's lots of oppression where witchcraft, the leaders in the country here were, kind of oppressed, where they would throw rocks at the stores and things like that. Does that happen in modern day times in the United Kingdom right now?
Not very often. Like you do hear the odd time where you'll hear of a witchcraft shop, and normally it's when they open in like posh little towns or villages, or they're quite conservative areas where they do get some pushback from, say, devout Christians. But I think
Sure.
that's very rare. I think that um, sometimes it's not necessarily oppression, but sometimes it is the opinion that, like, you're just talking rubbish, or there's not a seriousness about it. So I think sometimes people are like, oh well, it's just, they get their ideas of magic and witchcraft from Harry Potter, or something. And so a lot of it is, I guess, kind of misinformation. People don't actually know what it is, or they don't necessarily believe it. But I think I have noticed, particularly on online spaces, and with people who I know myself, where they've been interested in um, kind of witchcraft and magical practice, although they wouldn't have called themselves witches, and they've kind of gone the opposite way, where they've then become kind of um, Christian, but really heavily Christian, and they'll put a few posts online about the people they know and the witches they know, but it's never really anything where you would change what you're doing, or you're afraid. It's just a kind of a shift of opinion, which is, in the one sense, it's interesting how you can go from here to here, but then in the other, it's people have their right to their own beliefs, and actually at the end of the day doesn't actually impact me. And for me, that's fine. People can not believe what I do. They can have their own opinion about it. As long as they're not actually impacting me, then I'm all good.
She said that you were a tarot card reader for many, many years. When you
Hmm.
read the tarot cards, and well, first off, I would love to know, what is your favorite tarot deck?
Oh, well, do you know what? I always say to people, if I was rich, I would, and I'm not, but if I was rich, I'd be a tarot connoisseur and have all of these rare and beautiful decks. I think for actually reading, though, my favorite is the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And I know it's like often seen as the most, or one of the most boring. And I kind of had that opinion myself when I first started. But I think I was like, I wanted the glamour of those obscure decks. But actually, in terms of reading, I think it is perhaps one of the best decks to read with, um, whether you're a beginner or someone who is quite proficient. And I just think, because that symbology has been around for a long time, and the pictures are kind of in the the cultural conscious, um, I think it's just a good deck to use. But I think once you are kind of confident with how you feel the cards um, are speaking to you, and how you connect with them, I think actually, as long as you're choosing a deck that makes sense to you, then that's fine. But the Rider Waite Smith deck is my go-to.
Very cool. And well, the tarot deck, particularly that Rider Waite deck, is it's almost like it's kind of old school, and it's becoming traditional. And nowadays, in contemporary, and we have a lot of like new agey type of uh, culture that's coming,
Hmm.
with the magical landscape and things. And we have like these divinational decks that they call oracle cards. Do you read the oracle cards too, or do you just stick right to the tarot, the
Um,
78 tarot?
yeah, the 78 tarot is my go-to. But saying that, there is one tarot oracle deck that I actually really do enjoy using. And I don't know if you've heard of them where you guys are, but in the UK, there's these two wonderful ladies called the Seed Sisters. So um, they are herbalists. Okay, they're witches, but they're also herbalists. And when I say herbalists, I mean like the proper kind. They have got that clinical knowledge, which is actually really useful to have as a practicing witch, to have that clinical knowledge of plants. And so those guys did an oracle deck, and I think one of the things why I never really got on with oracle decks before is, I guess it's part of it is my own attitude towards them. I've kind of looked at them as like, oh, some of them, I guess some of them are just kind of a bit fluff. They're pretty and they look nice, but there's what's the meaning behind them? Is it just what someone's kind of come up with? And I guess it's fine if it talks to you and you have that if you like it. But for me, it always seemed a little bit, I don't know, new age and fluffy, because for me, the tarot has that history and that meaning, and it uses the archetypes of humanity, and that's for me where the power in them lies. And I always saw oracle decks as not being like that. But as I've got older, I think I'm becoming a little bit more open-minded. Um, and so the Seed Sisters deck was one they sent me to kind of review. I'd done some work with them in the past, um, on different like talks and that kind of thing. And what I really liked about this is that actually the basis of it was solid, so it had a clear basis, a clear, this is how you use it. It was based on plants and herbs, but it also had, you know, it was also associated with the elements. And I really like that. Cool pepper is one of my herbal heroes. And so it kind of reminds me of cool pepper a little bit, where the plants have astrological and they have astronomical and cardinal direction kind of crossover. And so it was based in very much, I kind of guess, the esoteric history of plants. And so I think that's why I really liked that deck. Um, and there are others that I find useful, but I think I find them useful more for personal kind of work as opposed to doing readings for other people. For me, they're almost like a tool to understand what you're going through in any given moment. And whereas the tarot can guide you along the path that you're on and kind of help with that decision making process, I think sometimes the oracle can help you just work through your own feelings a little bit, you know. So whereas the tarot can be like, actually, no, this is what you need to do, whether you want to or not. I feel like sometimes a good oracle deck is kind of okay, you know what you should be doing, but let's work through why you're not ready to get there yet. Um, and for me, that's a good way of using it, but that's more for personal kind of work, I think.
So any witch that writes a book, and you publish with writing a book about reclaiming food, and one of the things that pops into my mind is, well, if you're a wise one of humanity, what is the most nurturing, like best thing that you can eat that's good for you? What did you find in your research with food as a witch that helps you with staying healthy?
I guess what kind of encouraged me to write Reclaiming Food is that actually the art of cooking food from scratch is being lost, and
Right.
people are busy, they've got jobs, they've got constraints on their time and finances. And I think that people often think you need to have all of this equipment, you need to have the best of this and that in order to cook from scratch. And what really motivated me to write it was, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Jamie Oliver, the like celebrity chef over there. But over here, he's almost like a bit of an activist chef. But for me, he's someone who is like quite self-righteous, and a little bit condescending. So I can remember, when my children were little, and we were just like a one income household because I was a stay-at-home mom and my husband went off to work, and money was tight. He had this program, this celebrity chef, where it was like cheap meals for the family. And it really annoyed me because he whipped out of his cupboard some truffle oil. That is not something that the average family, especially the working class family, will have in their cupboard. And it kind of got me thinking that actually, um, as not only as a witch, but just as a person, we're losing knowledge, And for me, it's one of those things that you don't have to do it every day. Like we all love the convenience of convenience, right? But actually, once you've got that knowledge, it doesn't go anywhere, it stays with you. And so that was really kind of my basis for writing that book. I love making soups though. Soups are like my go-to. There's just something inherently witchy about making soups. And especially like when it was Halloween and I went to TK Maxx and bought one of those cast iron cooking pots that's like shaped like a cauldron. I love making soup in that.
I agree.
But you know, that is one of my favorite things because soups are one of those meals where they're nutritious and healthy, and actually you can whip one up from whatever you've got lying around.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it is pure alchemy really. Take these
It is.
ingredients, and
Yeah.
I think no matter what you've got, and as for me and for that book in particular, I wanted recipes that didn't take ages, you know, because nobody's got time to, you know, cook all day. I wanted recipes where you could go to your fridge and see what you needed to use, you know, what what was kind of nearing its lifespan. And my favorite soup is just a roasted vegetable soup. And so for me, if it's like a few days before shopping, and like the stuff in my fridge that is maybe, you know, the kind of stuff that is still good to eat, but you might not want to eat it like raw. So like tomatoes, for example, that are no longer firm. They're still good, but they're slightly squishy to the touch. Um, Things like that. Carrots that are no longer as crunchy and firm as they were like a few days ago, but still good to eat. Bang all of those in the oven with some oil, and then, you know, pop them in your pot, whiz it up with a bit of stock. And if you want to be luxurious, you can add a bit of cream and all of that stuff. But for me, soup making is one of those things that anybody can do. It's really
Mm.
easy. And I don't know, it just feels like pure magic.
The art of the witch. Creation is always going to be the best magic. Even when you're making your broth and little garlic, little onions, little basil. I'm with it. I'm with you. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on the Lone Wolf Show on witchcrafttv.online. And make sure you check out Emma Kathryn's books, which I'm sure you can check them out right on Amazon.com. And also Llewellyn Worldwide for season songs under that author. And I'll see you at WitchCon.
You
And
certainly will.
yeah, I'll see you at WitchCon, the largest conglomeracy of witches in the world. Many, many blessings from across the pond. Yeah, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been great. I always love talking about this jazz. So any opportunity I get, I like. I'm all over it.